Welcome to class today. We're trying out something new. We're trying this new format. So before we start, I just want to make you know that you will receive packet number 4. Whenever you see any writing in red or anything that is underlined, I want you to go ahead and fill it into your packet. So without further ado, let us begin. Today, what I want you to come out with is the idea of being able to define and describe physical chemical properties of matter. So you are going to have a DOL today at the end. It's going to be about 5 questions, and I pretty much want you to demonstrate mastery over physical chemical properties and changes by getting 4 out of 5 questions right. Matter. What is matter? Well, matter has a definition. Matter is anything that has a mass and a volume. So that makes anything that has some type of weight and takes up some type of space is qualified as matter. What I want you to do is take about 2 minutes to classify each term below into matter or not matter categories. So we have air, sugar, sunlight, sound, water, and your body. Go ahead, take about 2 minutes. So we've reached the halfway point. Remember, matter is anything that has a mass and a volume. – 30 seconds. So let's see how we did. For these items, things that take up space and volume are going to be considered matter. Air is one of the harder ones. You might think that because you can't see it, it doesn't take up any space or it's not there. It's still considered as matter because it does take up a volume. So when you usually fill up a balloon, you fill it with air. You can see the balloon gets bigger as you fill it up because you're filling with air, which is taking up that space and causing the balloon's volume to increase. Sugar. Sugar is a little bit easier to classify. It both takes up space and it has a mass. That means you can weigh it and see how heavy it is. Water. Water takes up space. We usually measure volumes of water, and it also has a mass. And your body right now where you're sitting is taking up space, and you have a mass that when you multiply it times gravity gives you what your weight is. Now items like sunlight and sound are not matter. Sunlight itself is just pure energy, and sound is just waves of energy being released from certain areas. So once again, the reason that these items are not matter is they have no mass and they take up no space. So sunlight and sound are forms of energy. Any form of energy is going to be considered not matter. Physical properties. Now, a physical property is a characteristic that can be measured and observed without changing the identity of a substance. Once again, the key thing here is we can measure it or observe it without changing the identity. That means if I start off with something at the beginning, it's going to be the same substance at the end. Physical properties are described through observation with the senses. So if you can use your senses to describe it, most likely it's going to be a physical property. Which means if I can see it, I can touch it, I can taste it, I can smell it. All these senses add up to a physical property. Take some time to write the words down if you haven't done so already. Remember, every time you see red words or underlined words, you might want to write it down in your packet. Now, this table shows some physical properties. These are the ones that I want you to remember. Color is a physical property. State of matter is a physical property, whether it's a solid, liquid, or gas. The melting point, which is pretty much the temperature at which something melts. The boiling point, temperature it takes for something to start boiling. Density, which is how much of something you have mass taking up a certain space. Solubility, how much you can dissolve of something. Electric conductivity, which is pretty much if it can actually generate electricity or conduct electricity, or it can insulate, which means it doesn't let electricity through. Malleability, how easily you can form it or deform it. Ductility, how easily you can form a solid into a wire. Or viscosity, how susceptible a liquid is to flow. Keep this in mind whenever you think of physical properties. Here's some examples of most notable ones that we've been talking about for a while. Malleable is ability to be molded into shape. So that means gold can be flattened out quite easily. So it's very malleable. And when we talk about ductile, which is the ability to draw into a wire, that means if I take a piece of metal and I apply enough stress and I stretch it out, it will eventually start turning into a thin wire as you stretch it. So that is ductility. Now we're going to move on to chemical properties. For chemical properties, there's only one chemical property. That's reactivity. And reactivity is how a substance reacts with another. In order to measure a chemical property, we do that by changing the substance. The picture right here is an example. It's a train that's been rusted. Rust is an example of a chemical property. Iron has the ability to rust, which means it's reacting with oxygen in the air. And in doing so, it's permanently changed. Now these questions are not on your packet. It's just practice questions for us before we actually move on. So which of the following includes an example of a chemical property of an element? We have A, aluminum is a solid at room temperature. B, sulfur is not shiny and is not malleable. C, sodium reacts with other substances, especially with water. D, silicon is shiny and is a poor conductor of electricity. Take some time to think about it. Now in this case, let's look at answer number 1. It says aluminum is a solid at room temperature. We talked about how the state of matter is a physical property. So the first one is a physical property, not a chemical property. Sulfur is not shiny and is not malleable. Remember we talked about if you can observe how it looks, which would be shiny using your senses, your eyes, that's a physical property. Is not malleable. Malleability is a physical property as well. So far A and B have given us pure physical properties. Sodium reacts with other substances, especially with water. Anytime you see the word reacts, that's going to be a chemical property. Remember, chemical properties are based on reactivity. How a substance reacts with one another. And you always create a new substance. Silicon is shiny and is a poor conductor of electricity. For D, it's telling me it's shiny. That means I could observe it. That's a physical property. And it says it's a poor conductor of electricity. The conductivity of something is also a physical property. So the only one that talks about a chemical property is letter C. For number 2, which of the following statement describes the physical property of chlorine? Take a few seconds to read through the answers, and then we'll go through and talk about them ourselves. Reacts with water to produce an acid. The first one, we've got that keyword again, the reactivity or reacts. Anytime you see that, once again, it's talking about a chemical property. Chemical properties can only be observed by reacting substances together. B, oxidizes aluminum metal. When something is oxidized, that is a chemical reaction. So it's talking about how we're taking aluminum metal and oxidizing it, or making aluminum metal and taking it and making it a chemical reaction. So B is also a chemical property. C, explodes when combined with sodium. Anytime you talk about explosions, reactions, oxidizations, anything that seems like it would change it drastically at the end and make it a new substance, that's going to talk about a chemical property. D, yellow-green gas. It says yellow-green gas. That means I can see the color of the gas. And anytime you use any of your senses to observe something, it's going to be a physical property. So the color is a physical property in this case. Which of the following is a chemical property of sodium? Once again, take a couple of seconds to look through the answer choices. Think about which ones you think might be correct for chemical properties, and we'll review it together in a minute. A says a silver white color. Now, the key thing here, it's a color. We can observe it. We can see it. That would be a physical property. Density of 0.968 grams per centimeter cube. Density is also a physical property. It's in that table that we saw at the very beginning. Soft at room temperature. Now in this case, how would I know if something was soft? I would have to touch it, and that's using my sense of touch. So in this case, that is also a physical property. D, tarnishes when exposed to air. So the key word here is tarnishes. When something tarnishes, it becomes dull. It changes to a new substance. So it went from shiny to tarnished because it's reacting with the air. Anytime you have anything change or react, it's going to be a chemical property. The ability to tarnish is a chemical property. Number 4, which of the following statements is true regarding physical and chemical properties? So once again, this is not on your packet, but take some time, read the answer choices, try and figure out which statement is true regarding physical and chemical properties. A, physical property describe how a substance reacts. If we look at this one, it says physical properties describe how a substance reacts. The keyword here is reacts. When things react, we're not talking about physical properties. We're talking about chemical properties. Remember, physical properties are just described by using your senses. We don't need to do a chemical reaction. When we do a chemical reaction, that is a chemical property. So the first statement is false. Chemical properties are observed or measured without changing the substance. Remember, In order to have a chemical property or witness a chemical property, we have to do a chemical reaction. Anytime we do a chemical reaction, we change the substance. The substance becomes something new. So that means letter B is also false. Physical properties cause a reaction to happen. Do physical properties create any type of reaction? The answer is no. Anytime you react, it's going to be a chemical property. Once again, reaction, reacts. These key words tell you that it's going to be chemical. Physical properties can be observed with the senses, so you don't really need to do any type of reaction. D. Chemical property describe how a substance reacts with others. D is correct because, as we said, anytime you see the word reacts, describing how one item behaves with another, it's going to be a chemical property. So letter D is the true statement.